All right, welcome everybody to another Developer Hours. Today we're going to be talking about the Interactivity API and how you can incorporate it into custom blocks. My name is Nick Diego, and I am a sponsored contributor through Automatic, working on WordPress full time, putting on events like this, writing for the developer blog, and also contributing back to Core. And joining me is our presenter for today's session, Damon Cook. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Damon Cook. I'm a developer advocate at WP Engine and a part-time sponsored contributor, and very happy to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us, Damon, and putting on this presentation today. Before we begin, I want to start with a bit of housekeeping. First, a couple announcements. Hopefully everybody knows that WordPress 6.5 just came out, and the Interactivity API is part of 6.5, which is perfect time to be giving this presentation. And I also wanted to share a little bit about developer hours in general. So developer hours, we try and run once or twice a month. We're kind of on a cadence of twice a month now, which is great. And our next event is going to be April 30th. And this event is going to be all about block bindings, which is another new feature in 6.5. So I'm going to drop the link to that meetup event in the chat here. So if this is your first time attending developer hours, these sessions are intended to be educational, but also a little bit casual. It's a place for WordPress developers to all kind of come together and learn about new topics in WordPress. We really try and focus on new things, whether it's a new functionality in the latest release, building with modern WordPress techniques like blocks and using components, all sorts of things like that. So at the end of this session, I'm going to be sharing a survey. So the survey is going to ask you some questions about this session, but it's also going to ask you things that you would like to learn about and things you would like us to bring to developer hours. So please stay tuned for that form, and we would love your feedback because we want these sessions to be as informative as possible and also help you all become hopefully better developers in WordPress. And so with that, housekeeping is over, and I'm going to kick it over to Damon to begin our presentation.
Thanks, Nick. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen so we can dig in and get my Zoom bar positioned. All right. Hopefully that's adequate size and everything, but speak up if it's a little too small or anything. Welcome everybody. Today I want to dig into the Interactivity API. I'll be focusing on kind of a next steps because I know recently there was a dev hours on kind of an introduction and overview to the Interactivity API, but I think I'll also be providing enough of information on some of the underlying APIs that'll help folks. So if you're kind of newer, you'll still get some stuff to walk away with, but it might be a little more advanced if you're new to, especially if you're new to creating custom blocks, that might be get advanced pretty quick, but hopefully you'll still walk away with something. But ideally, you've created a custom block with the create block package before, and kind of that would be my baseline for folks that are watching today. So let's see, let's get this closed. Nick, actually, if you wouldn't mind dropping all my code, actually, I can get this probably in chat. Yeah.
I can drop it
All the
for you.
Yeah, all the code that I'll be going through today is in this repository, feedback block. And I actually like sequenced the branches so that you can kind of check out and see the commit history. So if you start here from, step 0 and go to walk all the way through, then you can kind of see how I pieced things together in sequential order. Um, so I'm going to start by uh, actually sharing, let's see. Yeah, we'll start with step 0, which really is where we start to lean into the create block package. Um, and so we're just using the create block package here, and we're gonna give it a feedback block name and then short description. And then at the end, we want to target this template that uses the Interactivity API and kind of scaffolds the whole custom block for us, and even integrates the Interactivity API functionality. So really that's step 0. And I'm going to actually skip this step because I already ran it and I don't want you to stare at my screen while it spins up. So, but you can start here, run that command. Ideally, you would have Node installed and all that good stuff. But so that's kind of step 0. So step 1, now that we have a block created, um, I'll step into, actually, I'm going to switch branches so I can keep track over here as well. So step 1. All right. So with the create block package, after we ran that command, it spins up a plugin, a WordPress plugin, and it also creates a custom block inside the plugin. So we can start here. This is the plugin entry file for our WordPress plugin. It's just got the header definitions, and then it just calls the initialization to register our block. And then it's looking for, this is the block.json, which is kind of the heart of the entry for defining our block meta information. And with the create block package, it kind of gives us all this information for us in our custom block. So, this was all kind of generated from that command, but the additional change that we start to make here, and actually, I apologize. I think it would be beneficial for me to do a quick demo of what we're creating. Sorry about that, because I think, yeah, that'll help set the stage a little bit better. So what we're creating today with the Interactivity API is, here I have a simple WordPress site. It's 6.5 with the 2024 theme. I made some small customizations to the theme, nothing, just some color, maybe font choices, but the idea that we're going to create today, and I'll have to actually switch back to the main branch here, sorry. Yeah, give it a refresh. And right before, right before I found an error in my code. So we'll do some live debugging near the end here, but it's still functioning. But we're going to create this block here. So on the end of single posts, we want to allow our users to select like a sentiment, like, hey, was this post helpful? Did you like it? Love it? Does it need improvement? So they can click that and it toggles open, and then they can leave additional, great post. And when they click send, this sends an email it's using the admin address. So I'm using local for my site here, and it has a little email debugging, so we can see that the email is sent, and we'll get a little email here with a link to the post and what the user sentiment was. So that's what we're creating. Sorry for jumping over that and skipping and hopping all over. But so with that in mind, we'll go back now to step 1 branch. And okay, so block.json definitions, this is all pretty much default create block package, but the addition here that I've added is this uses context post ID. So for our block, since we are going to be putting it on a single post type, we want to be able to reference the post ID that it is on. So by passing the uses context, we can pass the post ID down into our block. So let's see. So in the render.php, which is um, where we'll probably spend most of our time with creating our HTML markup, our server logic in PHP, and establishing the Interactivity API directives, which are I'll start to dive into in a bit, but the directives are essentially assigning attributes to your HTML in key places, and they have a certain kind of prefixing, so you'll get used to seeing stuff. Let's see if there's any, yeah, so you'll start to see stuff like this. These are the Interactivity API directives that give your markup state and yeah. So we added the post ID, and then what we're going to do in our block render functionality here is just check for it early on. So, because we want to make sure that post ID is available, and then just return an empty string if it's not, just kind of a safety check. And then we start to create a local state with PHP. So this is kind of server-side logic. And if you're kind of used to creating the good old Ajax forms, then probably a lot of this will look familiar. We're passing down our post ID, and then we are passing WordPress's Ajax endpoint to process the form submission as the admin ajax.php. And then we are also passing a nonce, which is kind of a like a, I don't, for lack of a better word, soft security check. It's kind of a unique ID. So if a user goes and submits the form, then we can do a little safety check on that and make sure it's the source is valid from where they're submitting. So that's just an array that we're going to pass down. And this is kind of where we start to step into where the Interactivity API hooks into our markup. So the key part here that really initializes the API is having this directive data WP interactive. And we're giving it a just kind of our unique block name. So that's telling the Interactivity API that this DOM, this node, this div is where we want to initialize all our functionality for interactivity. So this is a key part. You should always have that if you want to start establishing, state and all that good stuff. So, and then the rest of this, I'm trying to think, was boilerplate from the create block package and the create block package interactivity template. So if we pull this up, let's see, I can probably, and I'm going to run npm run start so we can see where we're at. And I think we're going to actually, we'll probably yeah, let's create a new post. New test post, and we should be able to add our feedback block. And since we're not going to really focus on, well, yeah, I'm not going to really focus on the editor view today, but so this is kind of where we're at for the editor view. And then I'm just going to click publish here so we can see the front end. Open that in a new tab here. So currently with the existing markup that we have, this is what the template gives us. So there's a little interactivity here. It's just showing a little toggling. And yeah, this is using the button on click, and then these are all the directives, and there's great documentation available on on what these directives do and what each one. So I won't spend too much time, I guess. Well, yeah, I'll probably dive into some of these as we start establishing our unique markup for our form, but this is just the existing boilerplate markup. So not much has changed. I just added that post ID to block JSON and then added this stuff at the top of the file here. And then one other change I made just to demonstrate is I changed we have a console log for our post ID here. So we open up Inspector, should see the post ID. Yep. So just kind of a sanity check, make sure everything is progressing smoothly. So I'm gonna hop into step 2 here. And let me actually escape. Yeah. Stop my, there we go. Get rid of these changes here. Discard. All right, now we can go over to step 2 here. Now in step 2, I'm going to switch branches so we can just kind of see what changes here. And these are also kind of my notes, so I can make sure I'm getting all the stuff here. So step 2, add toggle bar markup, styling, and the user sentiments. So let's get our npm run start so we can have this running in the background and watching for changes. Nothing has changed in the block.json, but here in our render.php where the final front end markup exists is where we start adding in some stuff. So this user sentiments is just a PHP array I'm passing, and these are going to populate our buttons for how the user loves it, hates it, likes it. So we're just doing an ID label and icon. And we have 4 of these, and we're just passing an SVG for the icon. So we have it's okay, not great, and hate it. So we're going to use that in a little bit. So I'm just going to collapse that. And then this is where we start adding in our top half of our form area where the buttons will exist, and just the what's your feedback text. So just some divs here, and this is where, yeah, some of this is probably some familiar, hopefully, to you folks about PHP logic. We're just outputting and making this translatable text. And then this is where we're doing a for each loop for our user sentiments that we just looked at, and creating buttons and wrapping the SVG icon inside. So this is where we can start, really leveraging the Interactivity API's directives. And we're going to bind some of our, we have a ARIA checked, and we're going to update the option later on in the form. So whenever the user clicks one of the emoji kind of icons, it'll update and input with the form. So when it's submitted, that information will go along with it. We're doing some class. We're assigning a class here for selected, whichever one is selected. And then we're doing some on-click, which I'll show in our view.js file in a second. But all these data-wp are the directives that are associated with the Interactivity API. So that's really, let's see, that's the heart of the changes. What else? We have the user sentiments, we have the markup here, and then we also start adding in some of our CSS, which is in this style.scss. I am creating some CSS variables for us to use so that we can reference and keep those separate, and then just some kind of basic styling that we can use. So if we have that running in the background, so we should start to see, like, if we have update this, we'll start to see some changes. So now we have our trigger area with our icons, and they're not doing anything yet because we haven't hooked up the interactivity JavaScript, but we're still seeing our post ID. So yeah, so that's step 2 we're on here. And let's go, let me turn off my We'll get rid of these changes and we'll go into the next step. And feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go. Hopefully, Nick will interrupt me if there's anything critical, but we'll also have time at the end. So step 3. All right, step 3, add the form markup with our directives and the client-side store. All right, so we're going to start again in our render.php, and I'll run this. So it's watching for changes in the background. And we'll go up to I'll actually go up to the top here, and I'm going to collapse. This was the previous markup that we added. I'm going to collapse that so we can focus on, this is the newer markup that we're adding. So I called it the drawer that slides out with the form when the user selects their sentiment. So we just kind of have some wrapper divs. We also have a form status area, which we'll see when the user submits if it's successful or there's an error. We just give some indication for them. And then we have our form markup and just a text area and a button for submitting. And then we also have this hidden input, which takes in the selected user sentiment. So when the user selects any of the emojis, it updates this input and sends it along with the form for us. So that's the markup we're adding in this step. And again, we have all our directives, on submit, and then I'll watch for a callback, which this was actually throwing the error at the end, as you'll see. So we'll have to do some debugging there. Although it was odd because it was working last night, but that's how it always goes with these demos. So yeah, so that's the new markup that we're adding for the drawer. And then let's see, let's actually step into the view.js file now, because this is where, again, this is the client side interactivity logic that we'll need. So we're pulling in the key helpers here from the interactivity package. And then we want to reference our store, which is, this is also linked to the back up here. This is how we reference our interactive name for our block. So this is kind of a key critical piece for referencing the state for this block. And then we start establishing some state here on the client side. And there's, just to go back and kind of reiterate like this, you can have different means of establishing state. So I kind of wanted this information to always exist in our final markup. So it was just, I used it, PHP to do this on the server side. But yes, you can start to introduce state in our JavaScript here for the Interactivity API. So we're just setting some Booleans and some empty strings here. And then we can use getters to check for, here's our has success, has error, and form message, which is actually linked over here. That's probably, yeah, that's our messages. So we're just toggling some classes here for our message, which shows up above the form when with success or error. So we can use the get context, which is the local state we're getting, and check our statuses and update strings based on our status. And I guess, let's see. Yeah, I thought, okay, so yeah, step 3. This is kind of, I guess, where things start moving fast for us, because we start adding the submit form. logic, which is wrapped in a what is this called? I just actually learned this recently. I think I put it in my notes here. The generator function, yes. This was a new concept to me for working with JavaScript. And so this allows, I guess, I don't totally understand it yet, but maybe one of the developers on the chat can explain it. But when we trigger the submission, I think it's a matter of how this function is run, and we want it to be asynchronously run. But so the try and yield fetch here are key to making sure that things resolve appropriately and update like the state. Whereas my first try, I had just passed this without the generator function, and it still works, but I think it's about the handling of how um, users can submit this and how the information is returned. So it's a kind of a critical piece to use a generator function here. But this is the submit form is tied to our form. Where is it? There we go. Yeah, that's on the actions here. So we have on submit, and then we trigger the actions submit form, which calls over here. And we pass our event through. We, prevent default. So it won't actually submit and redirect. And then we kind of start hooking up, passing through our form data, the action, the nonce, the post ID. We set our form to processing, and this is where we start building our host to the server. So we pass the Ajax URL and our form data along, and then if it's successful, we pass a string back, and if there's an error, we update the status as well. The toggle form, this is what's doing the toggling with the icons. So we're just checking for is form hidden and is selected. And this is updating, the is selected is actually updating when you click on an icon, it's updating the hidden input in the form to pass along. And the focus field, this is where the bug lies that we'll figure out at the end, but yeah, this is where there's a bug actually in the code, but this is just our callback. So this is being called on. So when the user clicks an emoji, the form expands, and we want to shift focus to the field. So that's what it should be doing, but it's currently not. So, and then let's see. So that's that's all our interactivity JavaScript. And then I think in this step, we also added the rest of the styling for our form, which includes all let's see, the submit button and the text area and our focus and even our messages that we are going to display for success and error. So we added that to our CSS, and then I think, our get element, that was already there. Okay, so that's all pulling in the stuff that we need to hook everything up. So let's see where we're at on, and this is where the error starts to surface for the focus field, but it's still working. So we can toggle things open and closed. We can type in here and click submit. We get a success because, I think because the way we're handling the try catch, it's always going to kind of return a success in this, since we haven't really hooked up the server side logic to process the the Ajax call. So it's just returning a success anyways, but there's nothing being sent really. So, and then our state, yeah, things are getting better. Yeah, state probably might be handled a little bit better because it shouldn't really be toggling the message there. So that might be another bug worth fixing for sure. But that's where we're at right now. And I think, yeah, we also removed our post ID. We don't need that in the console anymore. So let's cancel this and then switch over to the next branch.
Before we move on to the next step, Damon,
Yeah.
can you provide a little commentary on, because this approach could be done with just like vanilla JavaScript. What, how does the interactivity help with this type of setup from your perspective?
Yeah. So I guess yes, this is the benefits of the interactivity API because it gives a standard way to for extenders, plugin developers, theme creators, anybody to have kind of a standard way to introduce state in the front end of their pages or even components or blocks essentially. um, but yeah, just having this standard methodology of how to hook this stuff up, because you can certainly do this with you know creating your own webpack configuration or whatever build tools you want, pulling in all the modules, and creating state. But yeah, this just really gives a kind of a standardized WordPress way to use a lot of these elements. And I mean, really, there's the documentation with, I think, the 6.5 release got tons of improvements, and there's a lot of information in there. So I would encourage people to lean on this. Yeah, to try to incorporate this interactivity, because you can certainly roll your own. It's just going to be a lot more work, and um, this, yeah, helps jumpstart things. And
Right.
the next developer can kind of understand what you are trying to do and what you're doing, and you can build off of that. So it's just a quicker, less context switching, especially when you're working in a team, um, on how to create these things. So
Yeah, and I just want to mention for the folks in the chat and listening is that you may not be building a block that has a form, but this structure of the store and the directives you use will be very consistent. You'll have callbacks, you'll have actions, you'll have state. So like even if you don't have this toggle form submit thing, like the structure of your block that uses the interactivity API will be very similar. So it's very translatable to other projects.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is kind of I mean, the form submission is a little kind of advanced, but yeah, all these you know, objects like state and actions and callbacks are relevant to any interactivity block that you would create. So, all right, hop over to step 4 here and make sure. So step 4, that this is where we hook up our server side logic to handle the submission. So when the Ajax request is sent from our JavaScript, um, we process and return success or error and check the security nonce and all that good stuff. So npm run start again. And I'm actually going to go back to the main plugin file. So we started kind of with this at the top, and then this is where we start. I started including the form submission handler. So when our JavaScript hits the admin ajax.php endpoint, this is where the processing starts to kick in, and we're using the Ajax add actions here, which can be confusing at times. I mean, if you're already kind of done this type of stuff in the previous classic WordPress world, then you're probably already familiar. But it's really this prefixing of WP Ajax, and then you use the, I think it's the action that we're using. Let's see if we head back over to our form. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, submit form. And then in the view.js is where, so we're using this action submit feedback. So that should match what is in our, the rest, yeah, so the rest of our callback here. So we're using, this is this submit feedback and then no priv feedback. So this is where we're doing, because we want our submissions to have additional security so that you know, this information isn't public, but also how it's sent. We can do additional checks here. So we're doing two actions here, and they're both referencing the same callback, which I'll step into here, which is right above. So we check for our nonce, and then we check for, yeah, no, that's actually just checking the nonce. And then we, if it's successful, we can start processing the form data that was passed. So we're just getting post ID, sanitizing our text area and getting the sentiment. And then we start to build our email. And down here is where we do, if we have everything, then send the mail and return success or failure. And then, yeah, then that's it for our server side logic. And then I think actually, yeah, that's so, oh no, sorry. And then additionally, so that would, let's actually run that and make sure we're seeing everything how we're looking. So we can actually, since we already had this, we added this manually to this post, but in a second, I'll show you how we actually hook this on to. So we're gonna actually just open up a random post here and see where we're at. So we have our toggling working, and we can leave a message, create post, we can hit send, and we get a success message. We can check over here and see that the email was received, and we get a link. So everything's working great. But the one step I wanted to show also in step 4 here is how we included. So on every post now, it's automatically added for us. And again, I manually, that's a bad example. Must have manually added. Let's go to hello world. Yeah, so here we see it's added automatically to the end of our single post. And we're using actually the block hooks API to do this. You don't necessarily have to do it this way. You could just probably do it in a pattern or a template to include our custom block. But I just, for exploration of block hooks, I wanted to use this methodology. But so we're just kind of checking for the context here. And I'm targeting, for my case, the core post terms. So if the core post terms block is on a single template, and then we, after it, we want to include our custom block here. So that automatically kind of injects our block. Of course, the user can go in and modify the template and remove that block, but this is kind of a nice way to just kind of automatically inject. So when this plugin is activated, it'll inject this block for us. So that's how it shows up on every single post. Let's see, step 4. Yep, that covers step 4. So everything really is working. And then for step 5, yeah, this was more of a kind of a housekeeping step to get some of these things renamed. So let me cancel this and get rid of our changes and switch over to the step 5 branch. And we'll start this back up. So for step 5, really we're just kind of, because with the create block package, it prefixes, or yeah, kind of not really a namespace per se, but it prefixes just this block naming convention, and we just wanted to have something more unique. So I just updated it in a few places. First being the block.json for our name. And then I think also the change is, no, we didn't have to change it here, but the styling as well, because, previously this was probably create block, feedback block. So just some of this retargeting our styling selectors. And then in the main plugin, we just changed it here for our block hooks to include the new block name. So that was just really a housekeeping step. um, so we can still check and make sure everything's working. We're still getting our good old error down there. This post needs work. And we can submit that. Make sure everything's working. Yep. Everything's still working. We'll cancel out of that. And then I think on the final step here, we're just adding some more styling, I think. To refresh, here we go. Step 6. Oh, I guess I didn't push up the README there. Oh, I think step 6, actually, I'm gonna check out my history here. Dun, dun, dun. Oh yeah, just some kind of made some CSS changes. So I'll show those over here. Just updated some of the contrast on some of these colors, like the success and error message backgrounds were a little too dark, so you couldn't see that, and just added a NVMRC to, because some folks use that to reference for their node versions when they switch. And then just the build assets are included. So we can just run a final npm run build, since we're on the last step here, and just verify one last time that everything's working. Let's actually jump to a different post. Hopefully, did I include it? Yeah, there we go. This is terrible. Send. And everything's still working. Yep. And you can link off to back to the post from the email. There are, again, some, I would not declare this production worthy. This is more of a training exercise. So, obviously this needs to be fixed, the focus field. So I would, this would be a next step to do, and I'll probably follow up on another branch with this fix. But additional steps I'd also encourage is the feedback message when they submit. You would probably want to use ARIA Live regions and speak that, because screen readers don't have that information. So yeah, you would want to definitely incorporate some ARIA Live regions for making sure screen readers get the success and error messages. And then also, I haven't tested this yet, but this, in theory, we would want to make sure that this fails gracefully. So if for some reason JavaScript was turned off, they would still get access to this form and still be able to fill it out and still be able to submit it. So we'd probably want to have maybe a redirect for that instance, so that when they submit, it takes them to a page like successful. And, so, yeah, if they don't have JavaScript, for some reason turned on, they still get the full form submission experience, which is kind of some of the decisions here of like what, how, and why I tried to set up state of, some of this is in the server logic and some of it is in the client side logic. So hopefully that makes sense. So that would definitely be a next step. Make sure, do some really thorough accessibility testing and make sure everything is tabbable and focusable and accessible, regardless of what, technology that the user is using. Um, so I think that's, yeah, I'm going to stop there and hopefully, hopefully I covered most of it, but yeah, I'd be happy to hit some questions that might
Yeah,
be lingering. Maybe oh, no, I'll leave my screen shared for now. Let's see if I can
cool.
get,
So Lisa has a question. Where are the results from the forms stored, or is that not part of it? Are they just emailed, or are they stored anywhere inside of WordPress admin or something like that?
right. No, we're just actually submitting it as an email. You could certainly store it in the database as, you could look to maybe use it as like comments. Like you probably have to do some custom functionality to hook into the comments APIs and pass it along as kind of like a comment, or you could use meta information. But in our instance, we are just submitting an email with the information and that's it. So
Mhm.
get the ID, post title, and yeah, just do an email. But you could add some additional logic in here and save it to however you want, post meta, or yeah.
Of course, that wouldn't be Interactivity API, so
Yep.
not needed for this. Um, I guess a question that I have for you
Mhm.
is what, when you think about like the directives, I shared the documentation for the directives, and there's a ton of them.
Mhm.
As a developer using kind of the Interactivity API I mean, it hasn't been out that long, so I'm not sure if this is one of your first projects with it or not, but how
Yeah.
was it working with the directives, and how did you find that process of working like within PHP? You're writing the directives in PHP, then you have your store in that Vue.js file. How did you find that experience? Because we're looking ahead to 6.5 and ways that we
Right.
can improve the API and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think my experience has been great so far. I think if anything, it's more of my understanding and experience with dealing with state and JavaScript. That's something I'm continuing to learn and probably apologize. Probably need more experience with. And so I know that I even reached out. Yeah, some of the key contributors to Interactivity API have been very helpful and supportive. And in the discussion, there's the discussions area, I think I call it, on GitHub, where a lot of folks share demos. And yeah, so I've been getting some insight on how to, especially I think my understanding around derived state was lacking, and some of the logic probably still in the Vue.js could be drier, do not repeat yourself, make things simpler. So I think, yeah, I think that the APIs are wonderful in Interactivity API, but it's more of, make sure you kind of have some experience and understanding of how state management works, which I'm still working on. And yeah, and yeah, I think that's a good background to kind of have and have that mental space for understanding that. So
Yeah, that's great. There's another question here which you can answer, I can answer. Are there any examples of two blocks communicating state between each other on a page that you know of? Are there any plans to do a further talk on this subject? Um, if you know the answer, by all means, but I also know the answer too, so I'll defer to
yeah,
you.
I don't know. I mean, you might know. I can't think of an example. Like I know there's like 3 or 4 blocks that currently use Interactivity API, and I know yes, you can share state. I mean, you would want to use global state, and you can have namespaces. So you know, you could, and I'm pretty sure it's documented. Let's see if I have it open. Doo, doo, doo.
So while you're looking that up, there's the movies demo, which was one of the first kind of
Right.
proof of concepts demo for the Interactivity API, and it does exactly this. I'm sharing the link to the movies demo. So this is a GitHub repo, and so you can click through it. And here I'm going to see. Let me see if we can. Damon, I'm dropping a link to the live preview
Oh
in
yeah, yeah,
Slack,
yeah.
and
I
maybe
can
you
open
could
that
just
up.
pull that up. It's just wpmovies.dev.
Whoops, wrong one. Let's see.
For some reason, it didn't link.
Yeah, this
So
is a great
this,
example.
so if Damon clicks on like the heart on one of the movies, you'll see in the top right hand corner, the heart got filled in. So these are two separate blocks, and the state is being shared across them. So you can take a look at the code on that. If this is of interest, we can definitely do more developer hours on more complicated implementations of the interactivity API. But this movies one is really quite cool and does quite a bit for you.
Yeah,
All
that's a
right.
great.
Barry's asking the hard question. How does the feedback block display in the editor?
Oh, yeah, great question. I spent zero time on the editor experience. So that would be also a next step. So if we hop into edit post, well, actually, this is going to be in the template, so you won't see it here, but do template. Let me move my thing out of the way. Single posts, hop in here, and oh, I had a previous plugin here, so I can get rid of that. But this, yeah, so this is our feedback block. That's it. Not an ideal experience. So yeah, hooking up that the components for the editor experience would be a great next step as well. Because you probably, yeah, want to have some options in there if necessary. And so
Yeah, and I think you probably would just do some sort of kind of default state where it kind of like shows what it generally looks like. But you wouldn't have like people being able to submit in here, but maybe you had some options around
right.
like what do the labels say, maybe what color is the font, what's the background. But the key thing about the interactivity API is it's for the front end, so not the editor. The editor is similar to like how do you store the data in the database, how do you modify the editor. Those are fantastic topics, but not interactivity related. So um,
Right.
yeah.
Great.
Let's see. Any more questions here? Oh, there's a question from about is there a simple example to create a lightbox using the API? I'm not aware of any, but I'll let Damon follow up on that. But while he's doing that, there's a core block. The image block in core actually has a lightbox built with the interactivity API. So I'll find that while we're talking.
Yeah, I think that's what GitHub. Yeah, if you
The WordPress core is starting to implement more and more interactivity into core blocks. So I always find that taking a peek at core blocks is a really good way of learning about the interactivity API, because you just kind of copy what they did in core.
Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of time in there. So yeah, the image block,
And then
and yeah, has some lightbox functionality. I'm not sure.
I think if you look at the view.js file, it should have some of the interactivity stuff in it.
Yeah, great
Yep.
point.
And there you can see the state actions callbacks, exactly what Damon had in his presentation. So
Yeah, lots to be learned from these blocks for standards for sure. Um, yeah, what I mean, so the image block. I think the navigation block uses some of the interactivity API. What else? I feel like I'm forgetting.
Oh,
Search.
the query loop, the query
Oh,
block,
right.
that has some kind of cool stuff there.
Yeah, that's an advanced one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the interactivity API, I think you can do some simple stuff like toggle. It is a pretty advanced API. I think that it tries to make things as easy as possible, but it is a relatively advanced API. Um, so I think that's important to get across
Yeah,
as if you're just starting to build blocks or you're just starting out. It's an advanced topic for sure.
I'm still learning it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we all are. That's why we're here.
yeah, yep. Share what you learn.
So, oh, and with that, I did put a link in here. So I put it a couple times, but there's a great, Damon mentioned this, there's a great discussion thread in GitHub about the interactivity API where people are sharing examples and sharing
Yeah.
implementations and asking questions. And it's a really good place to share what you learned or learn from other folks in the community.
Yep. Spend a lot of time in there as well.
Anything else you wanted to share, Tim, before we wrap up here?
No, check out the repo. I'll look to follow up with some more work there to get things working. But hopefully, yeah, the sequencing there helps. And feel free to submit pull requests if you find anything and want to explore it or fork the repo. And thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming.
And
Uh, there's a couple more things that I want to share for people who want to either engage with us or engage with, on the subject. One is that GitHub repo, and two, we have an outreach channel in the WordPress Slack. I'm going to post a link to that outreach channel here. So this is a place where non-contributors and contributors can kind of come together and test new functionality, talk about new functionality, learn about upcoming events. Damon and I are in that channel quite frequently. So I encourage everybody to at least join that Slack channel and just keep an eye on what's going on. And if you're trying out the interactivity API and running into issues or have an idea about how it could be improved for your own workflow, that's also a great venue to share that feedback. Um, for us personally, I think Damon, you can share where people can follow you if you'd like.
yeah, most of the better engagement is on Twitter or X, D
Okay.
Cook. Always feel free to ping me if you have a question there. And otherwise, WordPress Slack. I'm always up for colorful dash tones, I think, or yeah.
That's
Well, in
right.
Slack, you can find me by Damon Cook, but yeah.
Yeah, we're both very active in WordPress Slack and also on X, as it were. The last thing I wanted to share is oops, wrong link, is to our little feedback form. So I encourage everyone to kind of fill this out if you can, and then also provide some feedback around what you would like to see for future sessions. Our next session, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be on April 30th, and that is going to be on block bindings and custom fields. This should be a really cool session. It's going to be run by a colleague, Justin Tadlock, and he's going to be showcasing how to take data in custom fields and put it into blocks, basically creating dynamic content with block bindings. So really cool stuff that came out in 6.5, and we have some additional plans that are not yet finalized for May coming up. So stay tuned to that outreach channel. All those events will be announced there. Also the meetup, Learn WordPress meetup channel. All the events will be posted there. And if you have any questions following the session, please feel free to reach out to Damon or I, and we'll help you out the best we can, or at least connect you to folks who might know more than we do. So thank you all for attending today, and we hope to see you on a future developer hours. Have a good day.